There is a country in the middle of Europe with no army, no airport, and no train station of its own. You could walk across it in an afternoon. And yet, per person, it is one of the richest countries on Earth. Its entire population would fit inside a mid-size American football stadium with seats to spare. For most of its history, almost nobody outside its borders had a reason to know it existed. Then, in the space of about a week in 2008, its name was on the front page of newspapers on 3 continents. Because of a stolen disc, a bank employee who vanished into witness protection, and a corporate CEO who was marched out of his own house by police. This is the story of Liechtenstein, a country that survived by keeping secrets, and very nearly did not survive at all. Liechtenstein is one of only 2 doubly landlocked countries on the planet, meaning every country that touches its border is, itself, landlocked too. Wedged between Switzerland and Austria, it covers roughly 160 square kilometers. You could fit it inside most major cities and still have room left over. It was named in 1719, when the Holy Roman Emperor Charles VI granted the newly united territory to a loyal noble family, the House of Liechtenstein, and simply named the place after them. For nearly 2 centuries afterward, it was a quiet, agricultural backwater. Rural. Overlooked. The kind of place that existed mostly on paper. It became fully independent in 1866. And through the First World War, it kept its head down, leaning on neutral Switzerland for support, staying out of the fighting entirely. But it was the Second World War that almost erased Liechtenstein from the map completely, not through invasion, but through betrayal from within. By 1938, Nazi Germany had just annexed Austria in the Anschluss, and suddenly German troops were standing right at Liechtenstein's border. Inside the country, a local pro-Nazi party had been growing, the German national movement in Liechtenstein, and they had a plan. Their own Anschluss, their own annexation. On the night of March 24, 1939, around 40 of them marched toward the capital, Vaduz, planning to storm government buildings, provoke a violent clash, and use that chaos as the pretext to call in German troops waiting just across the border in Austria. If it had worked, Liechtenstein would have ceased to exist as an independent country within hours. It didn't work. Loyal citizens and government supporters blocked the plotters before they reached the capital. Word reached Berlin, and in one of the strange footnotes of the era, Hitler himself apparently saw no real benefit in swallowing a country this small and declined to send troops in support. The coup collapsed by morning. The ringleaders were arrested. Liechtenstein's independence survived by a matter of hours, not days. It was neutral, again, for the rest of the war. Quiet again. Almost nobody outside its borders ever learned how close it came to disappearing. But that near-death experience left a mark. A country this small, this exposed, sitting between 2 enormous neighbors, it could never survive on farming and goodwill alone. It needed something else. Something that made the rest of the world want Liechtenstein to keep existing. It found that something in secrecy. In the early 20th century, Liechtenstein rewrote its company law to make itself extraordinarily easy and extraordinarily private for outsiders to park money in. Foundations and trusts could be set up quickly, taxed lightly, and shielded by strict banking secrecy laws that made it very difficult for any outside government to find out who owned what. Combine that with a flat corporate tax rate that eventually settled around 12.5%, a fraction of what neighboring Germany or Austria charged, and Liechtenstein had built something remarkable out of nothing, an entire economy based on being the place where other people's money went quiet. It worked, spectacularly. By the 2000s, a handful of licensed banks in this country of a few tens of thousands of people were managing hundreds of billions of dollars in assets, the overwhelming majority of it belonging to foreign clients who had never set foot there. The largest of those banks, LGT, wasn't even a public company. It belonged to the princely family itself. Liechtenstein had turned discretion into an export industry. and for decades, almost nobody could prove exactly who was using it or why. That was the entire point. And that is exactly what fell apart in 2008. Here is where the story turns from history into a heist. Sometime in the mid-2000s, an employee of LGT Bank, a man named Heinrich Kieber, did something the bank's entire business model depended on nobody ever doing. He copied confidential client data, names, account details, the private financial lives of the bank's wealthiest customers laid out on a disk. Kieber didn't leak it to a journalist. He sold it to Germany's Foreign Intelligence Service for a reported fee in the millions of euros. Germany, in turn, used it to launch what would become the largest tax evasion investigation in the country's history. The data pointed to roughly 1,400 individuals, and the very first name to become a public scandal was one of the most recognizable executives in Germany. Klaus Zumwinkel, the chief executive of Deutsche Post, the equivalent of the CEO of a country's national postal service, one of its most visible companies. In February 2008, police raided his home and led him out in view of cameras. He resigned within days, accused of funneling money through Liechtenstein foundations to avoid roughly $1.5 million in German taxes. That was just the opening. In the weeks that followed, German authorities were reportedly carrying out up to 20 raids a day. Around 800 additional suspects came under investigation in Germany alone. Germany shared the leaked data with other governments, and the fallout spread to the United States and beyond. An international dragnet, all traced back to one stolen disk from one small Alpine bank. Kieber himself vanished. He was wanted by Liechtenstein authorities for the theft, but he later testified, anonymously, by videotape silhouetted against a white screen, to a United States Senate panel about how the system worked. Shell companies used, in his words, as camouflage, money layered through jurisdictions specifically chosen to make it nearly impossible for investigators to follow. He is reported to be living under a new identity in witness protection to this day. For a country whose entire financial reputation rested on the promise that client information simply did not leak, this was the worst possible scenario. The secret that Liechtenstein had spent a century learning how to sell had just been stolen and handed to the very governments it was designed to keep out. The fallout forced Liechtenstein's hand. The country that had built its entire post-war identity on discretion suddenly had no choice but to prove it could be transparent. In December 2008, the same year the scandal broke, Liechtenstein signed a tax information exchange agreement with the United States. In 2009, it adopted a broader transparency and reform package, and the OECD formally removed it from its blacklist of uncooperative tax havens. In 2010, the government agreed to pay Germany a fine of 50 million euros to settle the affair, and went on to sign further cooperation agreements with other countries in the years that followed. None of this happened because Liechtenstein suddenly had a change of heart. It happened because the alternative, staying on international blacklists, frozen out of the global banking system, would have been far more damaging than the fine itself. The secret had a price. Liechtenstein paid it and rebuilt. Liechtenstein still doesn't have its own airport or its own train line. You fly into Zurich and drive in, or take a Swiss train to the border and cross by bus. It still has no army. Its population today is still only in the tens of thousands. And yet, by most measures, it remains one of the richest countries on earth per person. No longer selling secrecy quite the way it once did, but still running on the low-tax, business-friendly framework that secrecy built in the first place. It has rebranded itself deliberately as a safe haven rather than a tax haven. A country for protecting wealth through legal structure, not for hiding it through silence. Twice in less than 100 years, Liechtenstein's entire existence came down to something almost nobody outside its borders was watching closely enough to notice. A 40-man march on a March night in 1939, and a stolen disc in 2008. Both times, the country that almost nobody could find on a map found a way to survive being found out. Every claim in this video is independently sourced. If you want more untold stories like this one, subscribe. A new one drops every Thursday.